Thanks so much for being here. I wanted to acknowledge Vern Slusser, who unfortunately could not be here today, for the inspiration for this talk. He shared with us an image of the Airdome Theater, the open air theater, which is going to feature in my talk today. And that's what got me interested in this topic. And so thanks to Vern and Absentia. I also want to say that the title of my talk comes from a film that played at the Airdome in 1914, The Pawns of Destiny. And it was such a great title, like I just had to borrow it for this talk. I think it conveys the melodramatic appeal of early cinema and the kinds of films that were shown. But it also has some nuance for what happened to the star of that film and also the movie business in Saugatuck. So we'll talk a little bit about destiny. Okay, so and now I'm just gonna hope, I'm not gonna say anything, I don't wanna jinx it. This is for especially Eric, not that Eric, but that one. While I talk, my brother is going to be a little rude sometimes. So, the success of motion pictures as a form of entertainment happened in an amazingly short period of time. In Saugatuck, as in small villages and big cities across the country, the popularity of the new medium was firmly established by 1910. When purpose-built movie theaters became standard. Within a decade, these early theaters made way for larger and grander structures, movie palaces in a lot of big cities. And here in Saugatuck, we had our movie palace, the theater at the Big Pavilion, which was added in 1919. The development of cinema in Saugatuck was determined by cultural and economic forces that are both unique and typical. So typical in that this is pretty much the same trajectory that the development of cinema followed everywhere, and more unique in that Saugatuck is a tourist town. Obviously, it's a resort community. So there were some things about that uniqueness that also determined the destiny of cinema in Saugatuck. I use the phrase, it seemed like Saugatuck was destined to exploit cinema in its growing popularity, along with a whole long list of other amusements offered to the public. So my talk today will provide a brief overview of the development of movies as a popular entertainment, and then focus on film exhibition in Saugatuck in the 50 years from 1910 to 1960. So here is my preview of coming attractions. I'm going to talk a little bit about early innovators. I really had to cut that part out because my presentation was too long, so I'm just going to hit a few highlights there. A little bit about the significance of vaudeville, the development of the first theaters, the nickelodeons, the movement to Hollywood, where the factory system was installed, a little bit about the star system and the importance it played in the success of the Hollywood studio system, and then get back to Saugatuck specifically with a focus on the Airdome, the theater at the Big Pavilion, and ending up again with some discussion of destiny. Okay. So in terms of some of the early innovators, I wanted to touch briefly on Edward Muybridge, whose important work in sequential photography was kind of the foundation for establishing the idea of motion pictures. Okay, so, and there's a long story that goes along with these images, but I'll just say that, as you can see, it's a series of photographic images of a horse galloping. And there are 16 images, that was the series, but when they're played in quick succession, you all know this, it creates the illusion of movement, which is really the basic principle of the movies. Okay, so motion pictures, moving pictures, the movies, established in the 1870s with the work of people like Edward Muybridge. Another set of brothers, actually, important innovators were Louis and Auguste Lumiere in France, and they developed a very small, elegant camera, which was called the cinematograph, which also doubled as a projector. So this was kind of distinct and interesting about their version of an early movie camera, because it was portable, it was hand cranked, operators could go out into the world and record a movie, and that night develop it with using the same device, and then the next night show it to an audience with another thing that they had to put in front of the camera to project it and provide enough light. So what I find really fascinating about the cinematograph is it did constitute the first film made in a lot of countries around the world, because the Lumiere sent their operators out into the world with the hand crank camera. They did what they called actualities, so things that were actually happening in the world, and then amazed audiences with the first movies in many places around the world. So this is an example of one of their first films from 1896, and it's just a train arriving in a station, okay? So it's an actual event in the world. The cameraman set up the camera, and they were all men, and just recorded what was kind of a prosaic event. But this film, at least in film history lore, was like an absolute revelation to audiences. So they saw this train, and you have to imagine it on a big screen, coming at them, a real train, and the reaction, having never seen anything like this before, was like, whoa, you know? So we can't really recapture that moment in history where it was such a phenomenal, novel experience for the early spectators of film. So I will just show you some of it. Again, the Lumiere films were noteworthy for the fact that they really did just go out and film what was happening. Okay, so they were like little mini documentaries, at least in the early years, and then whoa, it's on the train. It really does. And otherwise, it's a document of this period of time, 1896 in southern France, the way people dressed, the fact that there are so many people there to take the train, to meet the train, etc. Yeah. And in the United States, inventor and entrepreneur Thomas Edison is credited with developing movie technology. He actually directed the research of others who produced his camera, the kinetograph, and his viewer, the kinetoscope. And before the projection was possible in this country, the kinetoscope, the individual viewer, was the way that people watched short film strips, basically. So there were kinetoscope parlors set up, and you would pay your money and go watch and kind of go from viewer to see different programs of film. When another Edison employee, Thomas Armat, invented their version of the projector, Edison's greatest marvel. So he was quite a successful entrepreneur in addition to being an inventor, of course. This is one of Edison's early films. It's, I wanted to include it because it's hilarious. No. Because it was problematic content at the time. So these were actual well-known actors of the stage reproducing a kiss for the camera. So they went to Edison's little studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and got in front of Edison's camera, which was much larger and not very portable, and part because it was run by electricity. So, Edison was all about electricity. And so they tended to have vaudeville acts or people come into their studio and perform something for the camera. So that's the main distinction that I want to make between like the Lumiere films and the Edison films, is going out into the world to record what's actually happening, or creating for the camera an act or a little segment of something in this case. And those are the two main impulses still today in film, you know, like its ability to create a window on the world or to create imaginary worlds or worlds that don't exist except in front of the camera. Sometimes now, not even that. Or many times now, not even that. So this is The Kiss. And I'm just going to play it and turn down the music. Yeah. So from the beginning, moral arbiters worried about the content of films and its effect on audiences. And one contemporary critic wrote about this film: the spectacle of the prolonged pasturing on each other's lips was beastly enough in life size on the stage, but magnified to gargantuan proportions and repeated 3 times over, it is absolutely disgusting. This film was also denounced as repulsive to the clean mind by Catholic bishops, and the Catholic bishops would continue to play a role in kind of censoring and criticizing the content of films. Vaudeville, basically a variety show of light entertainment, including music, dancing, comedy, animals, acrobats, you name it, right? Pretty early on added short films to their program of entertainments. So as early as 1896, vaudeville started including films in their programs. And this is an image from the State Lake Theater in Chicago, and you can see that photoplays are right there on the sign. So I don't know that all these people are waiting to get into the theater, but it looks pretty impressive, and I'm going to imagine that they are. So as I mentioned, vaudeville or stage actors were early on became film subjects, and vaudeville theaters showed films, so they had this kind of reciprocal arrangement. But as movies became more popular and they advanced technologically and the storytelling became more complex, they became more, they basically contributed to the demise of vaudeville. Okay, so you could say over time, not necessarily led to the decline, but contributed to the decline of vaudeville. And so by 10 years after the development of film and the first exhibition of film, the Nickelodeon theater came on the scene, and Nickelodeon literally means nickel theater, okay, so nickel to get in. These were the first purpose-built movie theaters. The one pictured here was the actual first Nickelodeon. It was built in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It had 96 seats with room for 100 people to stand in the back. The shows ran from 8 a.m. to midnight on a kind of continuous basis. And according to contemporary commentators, the first day one of the opening of this Nickelodeon, 450 people showed up to watch the movies. Day two, 1,500 waited in line. So that gives you a sense of the, you know, the phenomenal success of movies. And so much so that this phrase became, you know, in common parlance, movie madness or nickel madness, but just kind of the craze for movies and going to the movies and their popularity. So I'll give you another statistic. By 1910, 10,000 small theaters attracted 26 million per week. And by now, movies had become a very popular standalone entertainment. Okay, so increasingly, from this moment on, actually, they had their own theaters. The theaters got bigger, et cetera. I did want to say that early on, however, a lot of the Nickelodeons were located in big cities and in urban centers and in working class neighborhoods. And they largely attracted working class and immigrant people. And that connotation kind of gave them a, you know, something to overcome over time in terms of attracting more middle class audiences. So I mentioned that because even in this image here, you can see that sign says, you can't read it, but I'll read it for you. It's refined entertainment for gentlemen, ladies, and children. Okay, so, and there's a big effort through these years to trying to, overcome that early image of dirty little theater where, seedy, kind of dark, dim, might get your butt pinched or whatever, into more, respectable entertainment. One journalist wrote in 1908, "There is no town of any size in the US which does not contain at least one nickelodeon. The nickelodeon is more varied than any other type of amusement. It presents its lessons more graphically, more stupendously, reproducing in heroic action life itself." The movies had arrived. Okay, so a lot of commentators at the time talked about the rapid growth of the movies, their effect on audiences, and their tremendous profitability. So as movies developed, movie theater etiquette also needed to develop. And so these are just the funny kind of slides that would be shown between reels. So typically, a program of short films would, consist of maybe 3 or 4 different short subjects, and then these slides would play in between while the reel was being changed. It could also be things like, no talking, or like the one that I showed at the beginning. So connecting to this, I found this very funny, I think, short film that was itself not meant to be the main subject on any given film program, but to replace one of those slides. So it would play in place of one of those slides. And in this case, this short, it's about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes, was directed by D.W. Griffith. So D.W. Griffith, his name later associated with some of the greatest achievements in American film history, notably or notoriously The Birth of a Nation. But Biograph Studio is where he got his training, basically. So he made a lot of short films at Biograph in this period, in this early period, where he really did innovate a lot of things that became kind of conventional to movie language a little bit later in the teens and 20s. So it's noteworthy for the fact that D.W. Griffith directed it. That guy in the checkered suit there is Mack Sennett, whose Keystone Studio was like notable, noteworthy a little bit later for slapstick comedies and the starting place for a lot of the big silent film superstars like Charlie Chaplin. And then the only other thing I want to say is that this film, made by Biograph Studio, features their whole ensemble of actors, basically, so that's who's in this film, including Florence Lawrence, who I'll be talking a little bit more about. So I'm gonna play this. I should have been talking over it while I was playing it. But a few things, you'll notice that no actors are credited, the director is not credited, only the studio is credited, okay? That was standard for the time, and I'll get back to that. In this case, I think it's fun that the movie is about going to the movies. Pretty early for that to be happening, right? And they've actually incorporated an early special effect, a traveling matte shot, so that you can see the movie that they're presumably watching, although not really. They're pretending to watch. And then it's got all of the elements of the Nickelodeon theater. Okay, so it's the piano player providing the music, the people kind of wandering in and out, which I think was also kind of standard. Mack Sennett doing his slapsticky thing there. And the main thing is that all these women are wearing very large hats, as was the fashion of the day. And in a minute, Florence Lawrence is going to come in. So I'll point her out. There's no real star of this one, but Florence Lawrence eventually showed up or was featured in hundreds of Biograph films. So many that she became there she is in the white. So she came in, the 2 big hats. So she was in so many Biograph films that she became known as the Biograph girl. And audiences really found her very, appealing. And so they started demanding to know more about her. I'll let you watch this, no, because it is pretty hilarious. And you ain't seen nothing yet. Okay. Whoa, there goes the hat. Typical music added by the piano. And American Biograph, I wanted to say, again, the name of the studio. Let me stop this first. And I wanted to point out, but I forgot to, that their logo was present in that throughout that entire film and kind of the background. So that AB was there. That was kind of an early copyright protection because piracy was rampant. So the studios tended to mark their films with their logo. In this case, American Biograph. Okay, so huge changes were occurring in the burgeoning movie industry from 1910 to 1920, including the consolidation of the film industry in Southern California. And that's a whole long story that I don't have time to get into. But basically, with the move to Hollywood land, longer, more complex films, more sophisticated films, higher ticket prices, more luxurious theaters, the more systematic turning out of films, so a more regularized production schedule and things like that, okay? So by the 1920s, Hollywood film industry was dominant in the world, okay? And one of the elements that led to that success was the star system, which is basically exploiting the popularity or charisma of the stars to market the films. And Florence Lawrence is generally considered by film historians to be the first movie star. She was, and for a couple of reasons. One is she was not a known entity before she appeared in film. So in other words, she wasn't a theater star, she wasn't in vaudeville. Her first gigs were in movies, and as I said, she became very popular, and audiences started noting her and wanting to know more about her, which is kind of the beginning of fan culture, okay? And then she eventually left Biograph and went to work for another studio where she was named in the credits and on the marquee. So that's kind of why she's credited with being the first movie star. There are other claims that could be made, but we're going to stick with flow here. And they do have a postcard of the same image that was loaned to me. I'm going to pass it around because it's encased in plastic, so you can see this was a postcard that's just kind of another more evidence of how popular she was, okay? Okay. So now moving to Saugatuck. This image is from 1920, and it shows two of the main theaters that I'm going to be talking about. One right here is the Airdome, and of course the big pavilion back there, okay? So during this same time period that Hollywood is really taking off, between 1910 and 20, the tourist or resort economy of Saugatuck has expanded and prospered and naturally incorporated movies into the mix of amusements offered. My impression is a lot of small theaters sprang up and disappeared, not just in Saugatuck, but everywhere during this time period. So there were a lot of people who are like, yeah, I want to get into the movies and make a lot of money. And they might have ran for a couple of years and then closed down. So, and that seems to have happened in Saugatuck too. So this is a fire insurance map from 1916 that shows 2 movie theaters on Water Street, and you can't see it very well, but this is the Airdome. And this is just called motion pictures, okay? I believe motion pictures, that building, was the Edgewater Theater. Okay, so the Edgewater Theater was established by E.L. Dale in 1912. It was a converted storefront, which was the way a lot of early movie theaters got started. It had about 100 seats. It was a typical nickel theater. According to James Sheridan, and he describes it, it was, quote, a long, narrow room with a projection booth located on the rear balcony. The theater was unventilated and dimly lit, heated in cold weather by a pot-bellied stove. So it wasn't that comfortable, okay? And this was, again, pretty not unusual for these early theaters. The tickets for the Edgewater ran from 5 to 15 cents for a program that lasted about an hour. It had hand-crank projectors, which again caused a delay between the reel changes. It had a pianist that played music to accompany the screen. I like this ad, which appeared in the commercial record. Everybody goes to the new Edgewater Theater. Get in line and be happy. Clean and refined singing and pictures. Only the best pictures will be shown. So there's, again, this emphasis on this is respectable entertainment. The next paragraph, ladies and children especially invited to attend. Okay, so still overcoming this. Oh, and this one is just a lie, I'm sure. Cool and comfortable at all times. Come and enjoy yourselves.
Where it was located? I know where the Airdome.
I think it was right here on Water Street.
Right.
Yeah, and it was only there for, which one? Okay.
Where Wicks Park would be now? Close to the ferry landing?
I think that's further down, if I'm not mistaken. So this is
Main Street is the one that goes.
This is Main Street, and
yeah, where the restrooms are.
so this is Wicks Park?
No.
No, that's further up there. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and I should have said as my qualifier, like I know quite a bit about film history, but I'm not an expert on the history of Saugatuck, and I'm learning, and it's really interesting. But if there are things here that you notice, please share them with me, because I am trying to, make sure that, first of all, you don't spread any inaccuracies, and secondly, I want to learn more. Okay.
Yes, but if you're getting
The next one that I found, oh, and I should say, like, I spent a lot of time with the commercial record, and it was kind of tedious. So I went through, in the years, and I would look for the ads, and these are some of the ones that I found. So there were ones for the Edgewater. For the Rink Theater, it ran ads in the commercial record in 1913, again, emphasizing high-class photo plays. I'm not sure where it was, okay? They don't bother saying location in the ad, but I think it might have been part of the East Shore Pavilion, which opened a month before the big pavilion and featured a dance floor and a roller rink. So it kind of makes sense that they would also offer films. This is just speculation. There was also something called the Powers Theater, and this was an ad from the commercial record in June of 1913. Again, I'm not sure where it was located. The films are from an earlier time, so they're from 1910. And I wanted to include this because, for one thing, this was a kind of film that people really were interested in at this time. They're basically current events, right? So it's the building of the Panama Canal. And the actual scenes from the Balkan War, probably not, but they did recreate scenes and pass them off as actually this is what happened. I also find this one interesting because it mentions Kinemacolor. And Kinemacolor was the first commercially successful color process. This is really early for a color film, okay? And while Kinemacolor was groundbreaking at the time, it really couldn't reproduce color that well, and it was eventually surpassed by Technicolor. But I want to note that this is typical in that movie exhibitors used advances in technology to help market the films, right? So this is ongoing. So moving on to open-air theaters. Open-air theaters became popular all around the country in the 1910s. They are generically called airdomes, which I did not know before this, so that was pretty cool. They operated in the Midwest, of course. In Michigan, there was one in Grand Rapids, there was one in Kalamazoo. They were more successful in the South and the Southwest, and I'm assuming that was because of nicer weather for longer periods of time. But in general, for audiences, it was comfortable to sit outside in the summer before air conditioning, okay? So that explains some of the appeal. Otherwise, they were very much like the indoor nickelodeons. They had the same kind of programs. They had the music. And they didn't really, by the time air conditioning and the theaters got bigger and air conditioning was added, they kind of disappeared to be replaced later by drive-in theaters. In Saugatuck, there may have been 4 open-air theaters, but I can only verify 2. One was one that was added to the big pavilion in 1913. So from 1913 to 1918, that's how people went to see films at the big pavilion. It was an open-air theater. The main one that I'm going to spend time talking about was the Airdome. It was built by Myron J. Beardsdorf of the Northern Amusement Company in 1912, and you saw the location on Water Street. It, according to a commercial record article from June of 1912, it will seat 600 people, which I thought was like, wow, that's really big. It will be fitted with opera chairs, as convenient as those in most theaters, and better in some respects, as they will be designed to withstand weather. The article continues to, good music and singing have been arranged, but there will be no vaudeville acts, for the moving pictures will be the best that can be procured and will be changed daily. So again, this kind of transition from films as one part of a program of other types of entertainment to the film is the main event. E.L. Dale, who owned the Edgewater, bought the Airdome in 1914, and I'm gonna say more about the Airdome. There's a nice picture of it. This is actually a postcard, and we have this postcard in our archive, or a version of it. No, it's just a digital, okay.
Train track.
Never been to urban tracks.
Yeah.
Yes. So a July 1912 commercial record article is talking about the opening of the Airdome. The Airdome was open to the public for the first time Wednesday evening, and every seat was filled. 3 shows were given, and they were very good. The pictures were scenes in Italy and the wild tribes in Borneo, and others accompanied by music. This is the first night the electric lights were used, and they worked very well, except for a slight hitch at first. And then they go on to praise the wiring company, which I thought was kind of fun. So again, it would be kind of typical, the travelogues, actualities, short melodramas, comedies. There were electric lights, as mentioned. There were piano and musical acts. The films were getting a bit longer, so that by 1913, the Airdome was showing 3 reelers, and a reel of film was about 12 minutes. So they're getting, longer and more complex. And I did want to mention that the Airdome closed in 1920. I couldn't find out why, but I imagine it was competition with the big pavilion, okay? I found a little article in the commercial record that Dale shipped the lumber from the structure, and it's got a big wooden, you kind of got a sense of that from the one image, a big wooden fence behind it or around it. He shipped the lumber from the structure to Newaygo, where he had a picture theater doing good business year-round. I also wanted to give some credit. Oops, nope. Okay, there's just another picture of the Airdome and one of the ads. This is announcing to our former patrons the opening of the Airdome. So it had changed hands. And there was a similar kind of announcement in the commercial record for the opening of the new season as well at both of the theaters, okay? But I wanted to give credit to the Pfaff family album. There in the bottom is the image of the Airdome with the Pawns of Destiny that I'm using as the image for my talk. And so the Pfaff family lived across the street from the Airdome, and the lot now occupied by the Mitten Brewery. And young Harry Pfaff was an avid photographer. We speculate that maybe he was even hired by the photography studio because he took so many pictures. He took several of the Airdome, including a few in this album, one of the back of the Airdome. And I think that it's just interesting that his proximity to this structure accounts for the fact that we have several pictures of the Airdome while we have none for any of the other theaters, okay? So just kind of, again, getting back to how local history is preserved. So this is a bit of a coincidence that Harry was interested in the Airdome. So now I want to talk a little bit about the Pawns of Destiny, which stars Florence Lawrence and Matt Moore in a film directed by her husband, Harry Salter. And the publicity surrounding this film claimed that Lawrence rescued actor Matt Moore from a fire that broke out on the set. The film actually featured a fire, but I guess the fire got out of control. So Flo, apparently carried the 200-pound Matt Moore to safety. So this story, like a lot of movie publicity then and now, is probably not true, but Lawrence was injured in the making of the film. She was burned, her hair was singed, she fell down, she was badly injured, and she had to leave off movie making for a couple of years, actually. So by the time she attempted to return to movie making, her fame and her career were essentially over. So this film marks the end of her career. And this image from Photoplay magazine is from 1914, so the same year. Growing Up with the Movies by Florence Lawrence. So she's the featured actress. And again, she was extremely popular, and she went from like super popularity to, nothing. That's showbiz. Okay, so moving on to the big pavilion. Its own fascinating story. I recommend this if you want to know more. I'm just going to focus on the little part about the theater, or insofar as much is known. As I mentioned, there was an open-air theater that was established or built in 1913. It was on the outside of the building. It was a sloping platform on the south end of the main building, and according to Kit Lane from this book, when it rained, the film was stopped and customers ran for cover. In 1918, the movie theater was moved inside, and Lane wrote, quote, "It remained open to the main portion of the ballroom, and for one admission ticket, a patron could see the movie and then dance the night away." Parents wanting to dance sometimes parked their children in the movie theater first, like we did with, the multiplex many years later. Okay. This is a commercial record ad for the Pavilion Theater from 1919, and this ad basically notes various entertainments, including a Norma Talmadge 5-reeler, and Norma Talmadge, another incredibly important or popular silent movie actress. The ad also notes that the hand crank projectors have been replaced by 2 motor-driven models, which eliminate the delays caused by reel changes. It also mentions various special attractions, including vocalists, dancers, and instrumentalists. And I think this Harry Barbino, I can't see it very well, but he was a harpist, which is kind of interesting. It also kind of alludes to censorship. So this is one of the ongoing themes. All the pictures will be free from any vulgar features. An early manager demanded, quote, clean entertainment, and that he has personally censored all the films so far booked. Okay. And by 1920, I think the Pavilion Theater had wiped out the competition. I didn't find any ads for any other theaters after that. This is an ad from 1923. It's a pretty big ad for the commercial record. It emphasizes the quality of the pictures produced by Paramount, which was by then the dominant theater, studio during this period. And I just, one of the films that they mentioned here is Adam and Eva, starring Marion Davies, who was the mistress of William Randolph Hearst, so if you're interested in that story. And you can see it here barely. This is a Cosmopolitan production. That's a company that William Randolph Hearst established to make films starring Marion Davies. Okay. This is a floor plan of the big pavilion, noting changes that were made over time. So, and I included here, I don't think you can see it very well, just to show that by now, the movie theater is taking up a pretty big part. Okay, so it's over here. It has 700 seats. It was enclosed in 1919. It was remodeled in 1930, and I'm going to talk more about that. And also, so it notes other changes that were made, like a porch was added or altered in 1938. Showers for wrestlers added in the 1950s. We're big time wrestling, okay. But with the advent of talkies, the movie theater needed to be enclosed, so it couldn't be open to the dance floor anymore. A soundproof wall was installed, along with a ticket booth and a separate theater entrance. The seating was updated and expanded. Heating was installed for the first time, but the theater actually never operated year-round because of low attendance. And there were like a couple of articles in the commercial record that were chiding people, like, you said you wanted to go to the movies in the winter and then you don't come. Oh dear, okay. I'm not going to talk about the Great Depression. I'm just going to move on. But this, it was wired for sound in 1930. So these are basically noting that big change. This article, the Big Pavilion sound equipment has already proved a success by the crowds which filled the theater to capacity early in the evening, leaving many to wait for the second show. And all who have attended are loud in their praise of its quality, which cannot be excelled. Saugatuck may well be proud of this great attraction. If last weekend was a forecast for the summer, it will prove a banner year. And then down on this ad, you can't see it, it's basically talking about the Western Electric sound system and the Arctic New Air conditioning. Yes. From the same year, 1930, this ad featuring a film called The Cuckoos. So I wanted to pause here a little bit because, again, this is, it's an interesting film because it's an early sound film. It's one of the earlier sound films that were shown in Saugatuck. And it was also a pre-code film. So do people know what I mean when I say that? Okay. So that's why I included this image on the right. So it's, you know, it's pretty risque. And this was something that would change after 1934 when Hollywood films were more systematically censored for content. But pre-1934, it was still kind of what you can get away with, including dancing girls in skimpy outfits as much as possible. And especially in early sound films where music and dancing was a big thing, right? So finally you can hear the music emanating from the film, and there's a lot of performance and a lot of that, just musicals in general as a genre emerging during this time period. In this case, it's also a pretty early color film. It's not color all the way through, but not like in Wizard of Oz where, you know, she's in Kansas and then she's in Oz and that color change is motivated. In this case, it's black and white, except for some musical numbers, okay? So, and this was not unusual at the time. Color was reserved for fantasy, musical, you know, not real, in part because the color doesn't look that real, but it did add to the spectacle. So, I wanted to show you a clip from that, but I think I'm gonna have to skip it. It's got it all. So it's not really a good film, but it's hilarious. I'll show a little bit. You won't be able to hear it very well either. Special effects.
It's like the train.
Well, a perfect landing.
Oh, and these Wheeler and Woolsey were very popular comedy duo from the time period.
Ruth was with him.
And it goes on. It's silly, but it's fun.
All his work.
These are the few images that we, or I should say Sally, was able to find of the Pavilion Theater. So that's the box office on the right, and maybe kind of the box office on the left or underneath that awning, maybe, we're speculating. So this is basically the golden age of movie-going in the United States. This is the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Most Americans went to see a movie at least once a week. Many went more frequently than that. And so here are a few of the programs from films during this era. 1939, just some of the kinds. And now the film titles will maybe start to look more familiar to some of you if you can read this. In 1943, a lot of the movies had something to do with the war or the war effort. So Hollywood was actively involved in the kind of the home front and kind of boosting spirits, et cetera. And the last one is an ad for Top of the Town Cinema in Saugatuck. I'm going to get back to that one in just a second, or a minute. Drive-ins became popular after World War II as baby-booming families bought cars and moved to the suburbs. The Starlight Theater was located on Blue Star Highway between Holland and Saugatuck, and it operated from 1948 to 1988, okay? And these films are from the 50s, and I thought this was interesting because the one on the right, or the two on the right, are Italian films. So we're showing some foreign films with more risque content. The actress in here, they're claiming, and I have to get close to read it. See the gal who's sexier than Mae West. Big claim. Okay. The big pavilion was destroyed by fire in May 1960. The loss of the brightest spot on the Great Lakes was a temporary blow to the tourist economy of Saugatuck, but the end of the pavilion era, right? And the pavilion era, the end was already in sight, I should mention, before the fire, but this certainly was a full stop to the end of that era. So according to Kit Lane, the owners originally planned to build a new dance pavilion and movie theater, and the new structure was scheduled to open in July, so they were like, throw these things up, right? When that opening date became unlikely, the theater manager of the old Pavilion Theater leased the Saugatuck High School to avoid losing first-run rights to the films that had already been booked, okay? So they built a new floor in the gym, added a projection booth with a new projector, a screen, a sound system. And the films that summer were shown at the Top of the Town Cinema, the old high school, the high school. And sadly, that endeavor did not last. So that was the end of movie-going in Saugatuck proper. So not counting the Starlight Drive-In Theater, there has been no commercial cinema in Saugatuck since 1960. Festivals and special screenings, such as the Waterfront Film Festival, have met with varying degrees of success. People still love movies, but increasingly prefer streaming in the comfort of their own homes to the communal experience of watching a movie in a darkened theater with strangers and the smell of popcorn. So the history of the movies in Saugatuck is a microcosm of the history of the most popular entertainment medium of the 20th century in all its pain and glory. And I want to end with a little postscript. Florence Lawrence, the Biograph girl, the first movie star. She died in 1938. After the injuries she suffered in the making of The Pawns of Destiny, Florence Lawrence experienced a series of personal and financial setbacks. She and her husband, who was also her business partner, Harry Salter, separated, and he died of a stroke a few years later at a very young age. She had two more short, unhappy marriages. Her third husband was an abusive alcoholic. In 1937, she was diagnosed with a rare bone disease that caused chronic pain. And in 1938, she ingested ant poison. She died penniless and mostly forgotten. Her grave remained unmarked until 1991, when this simple stone was placed by an anonymous British actor, probably Roddy McDowall. So Flo's tragic story became a classic, repeated and retold many times in the golden age of Hollywood. I have a few credits. And I want to especially acknowledge the archives, the archivists, especially Sally Winters. Thank you so much for your help. I also want to acknowledge all the people who helped put the Tuesday Talks together and make them so much fun and a successful event, including Steve. Thank you, Steve, for sponsoring. He is literally setting this up, literally, the chairs, etc., every week. The video team, Hallie for the promotion. Of course, Eric, our executive director, being the mastermind of the whole thing, and especially for all of you, our audience and members. We really appreciate you. So thank you so much. Yay!